Hi everyone, welcome to another episode on People Ops Playbook. I'm Vara, your host. I am a People Ops professional who's passionate about building awesome workplaces, and I love connecting with experts in this field to unpack real life stories, practical examples, tools, and frameworks to help us create more healthier and human organizations. So, talking about today's topic, it is on building inclusivity and belonging at workplace. Something I truly believe is that we all, as human beings, want to feel like we belong, especially when we talk about in the context of workplace. If I don't feel like I belong, I won't go above and beyond. I won't feel happy, and I won't feel fulfilled. Hence, the performance just drops. So belonging is super critical in any organization. And I do want to acknowledge that we all are very unique human beings. Someone who is a working parent, someone who has a disability, maybe it's visible, maybe it's not visible, like ADHD, someone who is an immigrant, someone whose first language is not English. How do we create those spaces where people feel like they are safe and welcomed? I think that's what belonging means, and that's what we're going to explore on this episode with an awesome guest, Daniel. Daniel is an awesome human being. I got a chance to connect on LinkedIn. He is super humble and have ton of experience in DEI, building gender equity and belonging work, working with universities, doing consulting, working in private, public sector. I'm super thrilled to have Daniel on this episode to talk about this particular topic. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me on this show.
Thank you very much for having me, Vara. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm joining you from Yalukit Willem country, just in the coastal area of Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Thanks for having me. Let's get into
Thank you
it.
so much. I would love to start off with your introduction. If you can share a little bit about yourself.
Ah, I've been in the equity, diversity, inclusion, belonging, and well-being space for about 25 years now. I fell into it by accident. A friend was working at a university. I was a little bit disaffected and bored with the job I was doing on a legal helpline, and my friend asked me if I'd come and help assess a uh, disability action plan. It was on a very short 3 month contract that extended for 8 years, and it involved a load of opportunities, secondments, and a director who actively developed me, placed me for long periods of time in disability team, in the First Nations team, in the sexual and gender diversity team, in the women's team, etc. So I was given the opportunity to develop a very broad overview of DEI, um, and everything related in the field and how it impacts each cohort and what the overlapping issues are and the commonalities are as well. I went from
Wow.
there working, as you said, in a variety of universities for government bodies, charities, and other not for profits, um, as well as private consulting.
Amazing. You seem to have you have covered everything. Like in DEI, there's so many different types of groups. And it's amazing that you got an opportunity to work on all different types of groups and build programs and initiatives. I would love to talk about, um, as we talk about like the DEI space, going into basics. What what does inclusivity mean? Like, what does belonging even mean in a workplace, and equity mean?
Well, I think, you know, it means that anybody, whoever they are, whatever they're bringing to the workplace, and however much they choose to share or not share, can feel comfortable, can feel they can contribute in safety, can feel that they are getting the opportunity to meet their potential in the workplace, to achieve their goals, and to be themselves, without having to second guess who they are, how they communicate, what they say, what they share, or how it's going to be received in the workplace. Ideally, workplaces should be able to be stress free on that personal level, and people can just come, be who they are, and do the job they've been hired to do, and build the company's capital through their lived experience and expertise.
Hmm. Absolutely. So if we have to dissect it a little bit, inclusivity first, and then we can go to belonging and the equity. If you can give like a couple words to it, um, in terms of how do we specifically define them?
Yeah,
Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
that's all right, Vara. And people will have different definitions. I'm probably a bit intuitive, and we all know what it feels like to be excluded. You know, we
Hmm.
all know what it feels like to be not included intentionally,
Yes.
whether it's in a conversation or in an event. It's the same in a workplace. We get it, even if we can't articulate that feeling very well. So, inclusion for me in a workplace is where there is active intention to
Hmm.
ensure that everybody has been considered, their needs have been considered, and if they haven't, there has been clear communication that it's okay to raise it, to raise your concerns, your needs, and that they will be taken seriously and they will be taken on board with empathy and intention to make it a positive experience for you. So inclusion is making sure we're all there, we can all participate, we can all be ourselves. Belonging, I think, it's very similar. We can relax, we can put the guard down, we can be authentically ourselves to the extent that we wish to share. A lot of stuff you read currently or hear is that you've got to be your authentic self. Now, for some people, they don't want to share everything in the workplace, and that's fair enough too. So you've got to have that breadth of vision. Some people, really want to bring it all in, and others do not. You've got to create a space where everybody can just be themselves. It is not rocket science, but it's difficult
Hmm.
because we need to step outside ourselves and our own lived experience and our own aspirations in a workplace to create that clear air for other people to fill it as they will, and to be open to suggestions and open to constructive criticism about how we might do things differently and better. So it's all about intentional intersectionality, really, in a nutshell. So if you can bring that every time you are creating a process or going through anything to enhance the employee experience from attraction onwards, have a really intentional intersectional view. Remember, truth is a roundabout. Life is as we all come at it differently. None of us are at the same. Try and be as broad as possible. And if you're not sure and if there are blind spots, ask people. They're the
Hmm.
experts. Do it appropriately in the workplace. And read up.
And yeah, and lastly, equity.
Well, equity, people get confused between equality and equity, right? You cannot have
Hmm.
equity. You cannot have equality unless people first have equity. Essentially, it is about raising the playing field. It is not about putting
Hmm.
one cohort or one group of people above anybody else or privileging anybody else. It is active recognition, intentional recognition that things need to change to give people the same level of opportunity, access, privilege that other people in the community and in workplaces have enjoyed unquestioningly. Um, they've just taken it on, not saying there's anything negative with that or bad, it's just they haven't thought beyond their experience. They haven't seen that the workplace and life outside workplaces might be significantly different and more difficult for people just because of their inherent personal characteristics, where they come from, what their accent is like, what their lived experience of ability, disability looks like, etc., etc., etc. So,
Hmm.
equity is about raising the playing field by being intentional, trying to learn about others' experiences. Only when we've achieved equity for all will we have any hope of having real equality, both organisational and social, economic,
Love that.
etc.
Yeah. So, talking about those three elements, when you walk into an organization, what are those signs or signals do you look for in the workplace to understand their culture of inclusivity or belonging? Adding to that, I also want to ask, when we hire a new person, new hire, how do we create that sense of belonging from the get-go, in the first few days
Sure.
and weeks?
Great question. I think it starts before you actually walk in physically. You look at their presence online. You see what they're promoting, what peak bodies and causes the organisation is aligned with publicly, and if there's some sort of, well, a real measure of commitment that you can see. The cause might not be socially or politically popular at the time, but if somebody is a real ally, they're going to stick the course. So I always look for that. I look at their communications, and I think you get a feel as to whether it's simply ticking boxes or it's actually heartfelt and substantive. Going into an organisation, I look for the visual cues. I look
Mm-hmm.
for their whether it's postcards or posters, um, letting people know that it is okay and it is safe to be somebody who lives with a disability, or you know to be someone who identifies outside the gender binary, or whatever it might be. There are little visual cues you can put up and people can immediately see them and go, I'm safe here. You then also look beyond that to the tenor of the conversation. um, I'd look at the full suite of policies, and how strong they are and how broad they are, and who has actually been considered and who has not yet been considered. And I'd be asking gently why if I see gaps there. And I'd be listening very carefully for the responses to see if it's just an oversight, if they haven't had the bandwidth or the resources to get there, or there is a more fundamental objection and they're just not going there. Because I think with inclusion, you can't call yourself an inclusive organisation unless you include everybody. You can't really cherry pick on this stuff and really sign off and say, yeah, we're right on and we're inclusive. No, we're picking and choosing. It's not enough.
If when we move into like the new hire um, onboarding process, though, do you think there's, I know with the policies, with the way the environment communicate, with the commitment the organization shows and have, all already kind of build that belonging sense. Because if I am an immigrant and I see that they actively, and English is not my first language, and if they're being more patient with me and they're trying to understand me and all those things already makes me feel like, oh, this is kind of very inclusive space. I feel respected. I feel that I'm safe to speak my mind if any, even if I make mistakes, and all that. So I think it kind of also answers the new hire onboarding
Yeah,
process.
sorry, Vara, you did ask me that. I think it's the same as when we first meet people. If we're at a party or an event and somebody's standing on the periphery, do we invite them in to join the conversation, or do we turn our backs ever so slightly? It's the same deal with a new hire. You go out of your way to check in. You perhaps assign them a buddy, because for any of us, whether English is our first language or it's not, or we come from a completely different cultural background, whatever it might be, we might have a invisible stigmatized identity that we're not sure that we can share, or that it's going to be safe to do so in a workplace. So there's a whole lot of things you can do, apart from the visual cues and that sort of stuff. Assign a buddy, help them work out the organisational nuts and bolts so they can just suss out the culture without taking too much focus away from the job they've been hired to do, right? You can,
Mhm.
in your communication, say, this is who we are, these are our values, this is how we try to live them. You can be honest as well. It's like, we're not doing so great here, but we're really focusing on it in the next 6 months because we know we need to get better. We'd love your input, you know.
Mhm.
If you have any thoughts at all, we try to have a really open communication style, and we like to share things, and everybody is welcome and encouraged to share their contributions because we believe that we are stronger together. Um, I think it's really important that you check in with new hires regularly just to see beyond the first few days, the first couple of months, are you okay? Is it as you expected? Is there anything that has taken you by surprise? Anything that's been a little bit of a shock that we can change for you, um, and just being reliable. It's like any social or personal relationship. You show up, you try your best to give the other person what they need to participate fully in the relationship, and you own your mistakes and you own your need to learn as well. You know,
Mm-hmm.
whenever you come into a new role, as you know, and we forget because we're all about ourselves, but it's disruptive for everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
we've got to, as a team, understand that it is going to be disruptive, integrating new energies, all that sort of stuff. And so we've got to be gentle with the whole team, and we've got to be open and communicative with the whole team, and make sure that that
Mm-hmm.
person is knitted in as quickly as possible.
Yeah. I honestly like the talent is so expensive, um, and that nobody is perfect. Identifying that and saying, "Hey, we're here for you. we want to constantly improve. How do we serve you better?" Because there's so many unique. We all are unique in our own ways, and I think creating that space is so. Already starts feeling like, okay, I feel belong because they're caring about me and they want to create a space for me.
Yeah, and if
That's
you've got
amazing.
things like resource groups for equity cohorts within the workplace, or a overarching DEI council or endeavour, let people know about it. You might be interested in these ones, blah blah blah. Don't make any assumptions, you know, as to what you can observe about the person. Just say this is the whole suite, the flexibility options. We're really open if there's something that you need to make your work experience here better and to make you feel that you can contribute and produce to the best of your ability. Let us know. If there are any reasonable accommodations that you might need, let us know about it. If we can't, we'll tell you. But
Hmm.
we've got every intention of making it as good and as personalised an experience for all our employees, because finding good talent is expensive and tough, keeping them even tougher. So it's
Yes.
worthwhile investing from the organisational point of view, and then it's up to that person. And sometimes things won't work. It won't be, you know, what you've expected in the workplace or whatever. But at least from both perspectives, you've done your best. From the organisational perspective, you thought, I've done everything I can to make Vara feel welcome. It's not right for her. She needs to move on. Okay, but we've learned these lessons.
I love that. I think that's one of the great program any organization can have is a DEI council or resource groups that says that if yeah, I know organizations like Dropbox have those resource groups like for LGBTQ plus community. And different disability groups they have like meetups
Mm,
once a month or something, just like a social event. They cook together, they talk about everything, they show that they're very welcoming. That was quite important too, that they're approachable, like making sure that they people can come to them. I think that's one of the great program any organization can have that people can rely on.
it can add real value to the organisation as well, as long as it's has real clear terms of reference and an intention to help drive the organisational agenda, enhance its reputation publicly. Resource groups can be so valuable to organisations, much better than monthly drinks or whatever. All those things are important for connection, and connection and belonging is, hand in hand, of
Hmm.
course. But they can also be real value adds to the organisation as well. So you can really utilise the people in those resource groups in ways that you can't in more formal organisational procedural kind of ways.
As a woman, for me, like because I grew up like that, grew up in a environment where the people say I'm lesser than men, that men are more superior,
Mm.
um, and that I need to listen to a man. It's quite like in a workplace, all these like we bring our experiences and everything, and having group like women led who are empowering, who create those spaces, and having the part of like a resource group where um, it's constantly about making me feel um, more. I think working on the equity factor that you mentioned, like uplifting certain groups, because of how the society was. And I think that's huge because I would produce more results. I believe that I can do more, um, and everything. So it makes a huge difference in my life.
Yeah, and it's really important for the allies as well, not people just in the equity groups, you know, but in your case as a woman, having your male allies and have the guys call each other out gently and supportively when we mess it up or when we talk over somebody or we repackage and uh, you know, share somebody else's idea, which happens far too often in meetings. I've witnessed it many times. A woman will share something, contribute something, and it will get overlooked, and then 3 seats down, somebody else will slightly reword it. Happens to be a man, and everyone will go, "Wow, that's great, great."
Hmm.
So we need to be aware of that, us guys, and we need to take it on and say, "Yeah, right. We can learn from here, and we can learn through listening." And it's the same for all the equity cohorts. We can learn from their experience, and it will add value to our own and our own worldview and experience outside the workplace as well. So
Absolutely.
I think it's a win-win for everyone. I know under a bit of threat in some quarters currently, but the business case and the human case for diversity, inclusion, and equity endeavours in every workplace is so strong. It's unassailable, and it'll come back.
So we talked about these practical programs. I would love for you to share, since you worked in very diverse and like complex organizations, they're huge with many thousands of employees. Would love to ask you one or two programs, initiatives that you took in DEI that created a impact, and what made them successful that we can take back and do it in our own organizations.
Sure. Um, I'll give you three very quickly. One
Okay.
was a disability inclusion action plan in an organisation that had never had one. That had two attempts previously. One was too hardcore, and one was too flabby. Really, didn't have any spine. And so we were tasked with it, knowing the history and knowing the people who developed those were still around, etc., etc. Big complex organisation, a lot of people living with disability, a lot of people living with non-apparent disability as well, who didn't feel safe. We worked very hard over a number of months to speak with people, to consult, to find out, and we developed a comprehensive plan looking at everything from the physical environment, the curriculum and educational environments, the online access, everything we could think of, but it was all because it had been fed to us through people who knew best. We also consulted widely with people who didn't live with disability, but who were aware, and also people who really it didn't factor, because we took information and wisdom from wherever we could get it, and we built a very comprehensive plan um, that was endorsed and enacted fairly quickly. It was not without its struggles, it was not without detractors, but it set a very firm foundation for that organisation to become very much more accessible, aware, inclusive for people with um, apparent and non-apparent disabilities, and was a really great exercise in having a whole lot of community input into something that we then had to finesse. The second one was probably I worked very closely with a Aboriginal elder colleague, and he and I developed some yarning circles, that they're called here, and I could play on my white privilege, and in agreement with him because we were good mates and still are. I could ask the uncomfortable, ignorant questions and come out with the stereotypes and things, frankly, that were offensive and I wouldn't ordinarily say. Um, but together we had decided that it would give people freedom and allow them to explore their own biases and their own blockages thinking wise. So if I could be that little bridge and say, so why can't I say this? Or when do you first get your free, whatever it might be? And all these things which are awful and uninformed and offensive, um, and then we could unpack them together. And that was really, really powerful because it was beginning a conversation for a number of non Indigenous Australian people who'd never had the opportunity to explore that. And there's no hope for any kind of reconciliation or any kind of progress in any D&I endeavour if there is shame and ignorance and embarrassment. So we need to get through that. We need to say, yes, we don't know this. You know, we don't understand. We don't understand the impacts of what we are doing, or maybe not even thinking about not doing or doing. Um, so if you can create that safe space where people can be vulnerable, can just be human, but open to learning. That was a really, really impactful series of conversations that we had, and we had a lot of very, very good feedback from people because it took away the blame, it took away any kind of judgment of people. It just allowed people to explore the inequities together and give them the opportunity to be curious in their own time and be challenged in the safety of their own home, do their research, do their reading, and hopefully come to a place of more understanding and more comfort with learning about everything that we don't know. That was a really good one. The third one was around sexual harassment, bullying and discrimination. That was a very big organisational wide campaign that was given to me as a result of 5 official grievances after a period of no official complaints around sex-based harassment. We knew it was a cultural thing, we knew it happened, but nobody talked about it and nobody actually made complaints because they didn't feel safe to. We were compelled to act, um, so I developed what was initially a 3-year program looking at all staff, all students, and all stakeholders, including external contractors, etc. We developed an educational piece, a 3-hour workshop, which we rolled out for 20 people at a time. We had posters and marketing and everything. We had events, big events internally, a big public launch. We had um, developed key relationships with peak bodies in the space nationally, and utilise their wisdom and their resources to create a culture in the organisation where it was okay to talk about this stuff. Again, very threatening back then. It wasn't part of the conversation in Australian workplaces. It was met with great resistance initially until people started to come to the workshops and realised again, it wasn't about beating people over the head. And it was about inviting people to understand that we were starting from a very low base and undesirable and um, unsupportable reality, but together we had the responsibility to change our culture. So we were going to name it, we were going to draw a line in the sand, and together we were going to be informed about the law, about the reality. We're going to create a space where people can talk, can make official grievances if necessary, and can safely and supportively pull themselves up and each other to understand that a new workplace culture needs new behaviours and new expectations and new aspirations. So we did all that together. It went for the initial 3 years. It then went for another 15 years until a national program came in across all universities. It was very, very successful. And I believe it did really change the culture and became something that the entire organisation was very, very proud of. And we shared with a number of organisations globally.
Wow, that's amazing. So the first example that you shared was um, on disability. Like examples, like I know some people that I've heard in the organization I worked, like when they walked in, they don't know where the wheelchair access is. They don't know where there are certain types of formats. Like everything is online, but they never taught how to do online. Or there's so many different challenges that they faced. I think that is such a easy yet effective way to build a program. Just talking to the people, understanding what are we missing, what are the gaps, what can we do more, and building a program around it. I think that's something that I think that's such an easy framework, but so powerful for any HR people to just go, or DEI people to go ahead and do it.
Well, Vara, I'd pull you up. I'd say all HR people, and they can do it before um, onboarding anybody, just through the attraction and recruitment process. Um, it's how you word your ads and what you include in your diversity ribbon statement and what you have online, saying, calling it out, saying this is where we're wanting to get to. We know we're not quite there yet. We can use your input. We really appreciate people who do share their circumstance with us. We understand if you don't want to, but
Hmm.
it is safe for you to do so. This is where your information will be held. This is who will have access to it, etc., etc. So you can start from the very word go. When you invite someone for interview, do you have any requirements for the interview process? Do you need to bring a support
Hmm.
person or animal with you? Um, Anything that it might be. I think we just need to think very broadly and not assume anything about anybody, no matter what they look like, no matter what their written application might read like, no matter what they might sound like on the phone if you've had a conversation with them. You just set the same inclusive rules for everybody. Most
Hmm.
people may not need them, but those who do will see it, they'll appreciate it, and they'll probably access it. And it just sets up that level of trust from the word go, that people can
Yeah.
be themselves, they can belong, they will be considered, if and adjustments and accommodations will be made if they're at all possible.
Yeah, I think a couple of organizations keep that in the job posting that, oh, if you need any accommodation, let us know. But taking a little bit further and really sharing that this is what we committed it, it's okay if you don't want to share it. And all those things are more authentic and makes person feels like they really care, not just copy pasting the text that we see in all the job posting, which feels generic and not sure they really actually do or not.
Exactly.
That was a great example.
I think the important thing is that it also allows people in the majority to address the idea of privilege, and privilege can make people very uncomfortable. And I am at pinnacle of privilege, white privilege in this country. You know, I think it's not something necessarily that guilt or any of those emotions that we can attach to it are very helpful. It's how you use it and what you do with that to ensure that you can use education, background, all those privileges to ensure that people who haven't had access to that um, get it. Or you work as much as you can to ensure that that playing field is being levelled up. So
Yeah.
I think that can be a really useful thing to recognise where you are and own it and work with it to make uh, the world more equitable within your sphere of
Yeah.
influence, obviously. And back to the job things, I think another really small one that people can think about is in the wording of job ads or whatever else. Remember, even from the research, we know that men will apply for jobs if they can sign their names off on against the criteria. Women, unless they can match all the criteria asked for, often will not apply. Of course, not all women, but lots of research has shown that women tend to be not quite as upfront like guys are and say, yeah, I can do that, I can do that, I'll learn it on the way. Women like to be assured that they can do it. So it's about wording your ads as well. Do you really need to have 12 essential criteria? Or can you invite people to say, look, we know you might not meet all of these on paper. Get in touch with us, apply, tell us about your experience. Because there may well be transferable skills and things that we as an organisation can really benefit from. And again, in that way, hopefully it will reassure people that yes, they can come in and um, they can apply with confidence and that they will be looked at seriously and considered seriously. Little things like that can really help, I think, create that sense of
Absolutely.
inclusion and welcome from the word go.
Yeah, that research is super helpful. I've read it too, and also with respect to different cultures, I've noticed that, for example, in Nigeria, the culture is that they build like 4 or 5 pages of resume, and in Canada, it's only 1 page. And if it's more than 1 page, people would reject it because it's the culture that it should not be more than 1 page. So the more we aware of about all these things, the more we can find those diverse talent which has huge benefit to the workplace. All these are I see as a biases, unconscious
Mm.
biases that constantly we need to keep in check. And I love how job posting is everything. Job posting, the career page is everything about that talks about who the company is. And um, the more authentic, the more real they keep, the more they will attract people who align with those values. um, yeah, I love that. And
I also think it's great if organisations have the resources, and many don't, to be really targeted in your
mhm.
recruitment. You know, go beyond the big job boards or job sites and go to community. Go to community radio. Go to big peak bodies in community for different cohorts and say, listen, this is what we've got coming up. Build a relationship with them, um, and you can get really great talent who might not otherwise have access to those jobs or see them, or will discount them and think, no, it's not for me. Um, I think it's really important to be explicit in your welcome of um, people from culturally and linguistically diverse and culturally and racially marginalised groups as well. And unfortunately, you know, traditionally we've had a bit of a problem in this country with people with long names or accents. You know, we're not very
Yeah.
strong on those. um, you know, even though we're one of the highest migrant background countries in the modern world, but I think you need to reassure people that they are okay to sign their names and don't have to anglicise things or change key details about where they have studied or got their qualifications or where they have worked in the past. I've had many conversations with people who've had to do that in the past simply to get through the door. And I think we need to change our mindsets. And people in HR more broadly, you know, really need to think ahead of that and
Hmm.
somehow communicate that it is okay to be yourself. And we celebrate qualifications from all sorts of places and people bringing their rich cultural heritage, language, and accents into our workplace because there's space for everyone.
Yes. And but have you ever been in this organization where like leadership support, they say they want to do DEI. They have pressure from board or from the government that they need to have certain DEI policies, but leadership is like not very in line. They are whatever they're doing looks very performative or surface level. How did you navigate it personally in these situations to create meaningful change?
Vara, I've had a lot of experiences with that, so I'm not going to bore you and your listeners with all of them, but I will say with some, it's about recognising that people in leadership positions are also vulnerable and human and don't know a lot of this stuff. There might also be other factors, whether they're political, whether they're faith based, whether they're um, tied to funding, that are tying people's hands around giving all cohorts equal access and promoting that organisation as welcoming and supportive of all. And I'm thinking particularly of sexual and gender diverse people, which traditionally has been a challenging cohort for some organisations to fully embrace and welcome. It is changing, thankfully. Um, I think you do have to start with pointing out to leadership that it's a journey for everybody. You can have targeted trainings that are discreet and that people can explore this stuff in depth safely and not at risk of their seniority being questioned or anything like that. You can approach it that way. You can raise the communications for leadership, um, including the business case for it and why extending your inclusion and your intersectional lens to everybody is actually really, really healthy for the organisation and will lead to greater sustainability, greater rates of attraction, you'll have deeper talent pools to draw from, all of those things. So I think you take it from both a heart level but also a business case, hip pocket, bottom line level as well, if you can. Some organisations won't. They're just not at that level of maturity, and that's okay too. So you meet people where they're at. You try to push as much as you can within reason, but you can't force people because it's not going to work for the organisation, it's not going to work for the leadership, and it's certainly not going to work for any employees who come in who are not actually welcome or included. They're doing it just to tick boxes or meet quotas or whatever. It's not going to be a happy outcome for anybody. So I think in that situation, you need to decide whether you're content as a DEI practitioner to work on one or two focus areas and do the best you can there. Hopefully, optimistic that that will lead to a little more bravery and reach further down the track to include all the other equity groups. I don't think I can give a one set answer for this. I think this is up to the individual equity practitioner. Try and influence as much as you can. But I do feel very firmly that organisations, as I've said, can't really call themselves inclusive if they're just cherry picking and they're doing so because of performative or compliance necessities. I, yeah. And I think there's been very, very good examples in the last few months, certainly closer to where you're sitting in Canada, of some organisations really showing their true colours around D&I to their cost. And it's really interesting now that those who are staying the course and saying, well, this is who we are and this is what we commit to, and we stand by all our employees and potential future employees, and we support these communities, they will benefit because this will pass and they will have that loyalty and engagement and productivity and profit going forward. Those others who have capitulated will really need to work hard to rebuild those relationships, I would think, humbly.
Yeah. Yeah, on those things, like there's a lot happening in the US. I won't get into it, but I know people who are listening to this podcast know that there's so much happening right now with new leadership in US. But moving ahead, I have one final question. I absolutely super enjoyed our conversation. A lot of actionable programs, initiative you shared that I can give it to the HR audience who are listening to this. Would love to know on these lines if you can share what are your go-to resources, like either books, thought leaders, or tools that you recommend for us to trying to upskill in DEI and culture change.
Oh, that's a really big question, Vara. I'll try and keep it really short and snappy because I find it wherever I can, and I try to
Mhm.
adapt any learnings. And it could be a spiritual leader or somebody outside HR, DEI, but you can still learn from and adapt their teachings. Um, I would suggest to anybody that they just research. There is so much on the net and so much in libraries and so much research. Um, Here in Australia, the Diversity Council of Australia is a really strong body that has got a fantastic reach and brilliant resource libraries, and they're very helpful and they've been around a long time. They've got great credibility. I would look at peak bodies for each of the equity cohort. And again, speaking from the Australian perspective, Pride in Diversity, um, which I did have the pleasure of working with during their initial startup years, and they came about with a lot of support from Stonewall in the UK. So in the sexual and gender diversity space, they're the peak body nationally here, and I know there are others in North America and in Canada who have been which have been around for an awfully long time and do equally fantastic stuff. Individuals, oh golly, um, Arthur Chan on LinkedIn. I think he's in America, in the USA. He writes brilliant, very short but very cogent advice in the DEI space, and I really enjoy following him. Some people I know and have known for many years and worked with. So full disclosure here, um, Fiona Crowell, Roman Rozbaki, Tom Verese have just published a book called The Fearless Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Practitioner. You should be able to find it online. Um, and I would happily endorse that because they have walked this talk for a very long time. Like me, they've been in the space, we're old greybeards now, but they have proved effective, resilient, they still have a great sense of humour, which is very important, and they know their stuff. So I think in the DEI space, one of the things that I've learned over the years is things can come in seasons and in waves. That there are certain trends and things, and a great advantage of being a long-term practitioner is that you can get an overview of what has worked in the past and what has been real challenges and things you haven't expected. And certainly those people have been around for a long time and have great wisdom to impart. Also about how to protect yourself in this space because it can be challenging for all of us. It can lead to existential questions and burnout for people. So you've really got to look after yourself as a DEI practitioner and people in HR more broadly. It can be a really tough gig when times are tough in the organisation or more broadly socially and economically. So, yeah. But I'd Google, I'd look out, I'd find. Brené Brown, she's also got brilliant words of wisdom on any number of things. I just I just search.
Wow. Yeah, I would love to attach all those links down below in the description. Yeah, I guess audience would have seen my cat just going around.
Beautiful.
She's very cute. Yeah. Okay, so I think that's it. We come to the end. It was such a pleasure. We will also look for your book coming up one day.
Ah, keep looking, Vara. I'll let you know.
So yes, love it, love it. Super excited. Thank you so much, Daniel. You're so amazing, beautiful human being. Thank you for joining me on this show and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Vara. It's been a real pleasure, and I hope there's been a few things people can take away from that. Um,
A
it's
lot.
a real pleasure talking to you both, you and the cat.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone who's listening to this episode. And look forward to the resources.